Assetto Corsa Competizione Nordschleife has been out for over a week right now. For me, the best Nordschleife available at the moment for sim racing, but it does come at a huge cost in its performance. At this point, it can be abysmal because you do need to do some tweaks that aren't really necessary in other big tracks. As it was with the start of Assetto Corsa Competizione, Unreal Engine 4 sometimes puts the game back in terms of performance, in terms of graphical quality or sharpening. It feels always a little bit too blurred if you don't use it at 1440p or 4K. And also, there are some issues with Unreal Engine 4 that were somewhat corrected for Assetto Corsa Competizione, but not for other titles. For example, for the new eSports WRC, Kunos did a good job, but for Nordschleife, it does seem that in terms of performance, it is not like that as it is with other tracks right now. So today's video is going to be about increasing the performance of Nordschleife. It's very easy to lower everything to low and mediums, but I still like to play with some sort of, graphical fidelity and still look good. For that, there are some things that we need to tweak, and we'll have a look at those now. Let's start with the tweaks. The first tweak I am going to recommend, it is something that it doesn't feel like it should be the case, but unfortunately it is the case. You have to disable the circuit map. The circuit map will free up a lot of FPS. It's basically free FPS. For Assetto Corsa Competizione, it will be useful to have this, but sadly there is something there in the way this game was built. If you remove the circuit map, you'll have some uplifting of your FPS. All the settings I have here are to have some sort of graphical quality. Of course, you cannot go all the way down and, be done with it, but we're not doing exactly that. In terms of view distance, I do like to increase the view distance to around high because, you want to see stuff at the distance. Of course, you can reduce this from epic to high, and that will be more than enough, and probably mid would also be enough. In terms of the shadows, I would recommend you to load the shadows either to mid or to low. Getting the shadows to low does make it feel sometimes that the cars are floating, and I don't like that because it kind of breaks the immersion for me. Shadow distances, you can actually do it to mid, and it will help a slight bit. And this is actually the big one, DLSS and FSR. I'll be giving you another tip on DLSS a little bit later. If you have a 20 series or above, not having DLSS enabled is essentially wasting FPS. So this is only available for the RTX 20 series and above. It's not below that or for the AMD cards. And for the DLSS quality, you either choose quality or balance. Balance is actually pretty okay, but from what I've seen, performance, from balance to performance and ultra performance, from balance to performance, it's basically just 1 or 2 FPS. So balanced or quality are really good choices. Generally, I'll leave it at balanced. In terms of sharpness, I don't like the sharpening effect on the DLSS, especially on the TV, so I just leave it at 0. Likewise, for FSR, if you don't have the RTX 20 or above, you should use FSR. FSR is basically available for every single graphics card up to NVIDIA 600 series or something like that. If you have something like a 10 series, like a 1080 or 1080 Ti or 1060, that are still plenty of common, you should use FSR to uplift your performance, especially when you are going to resolutions above 1080. At 1080 or below, the FSR and even the DLSS doesn't really work that well because the super sampling does need to do super sampling to something. And when you add FSR at 1080p, it's really not that much of an uplift, but if you add it, there might be something there for you. If you don't have access to DLSS, activate FSR, and on FSR, leave it at something like balanced or quality or even ultra quality. It should help you somewhat. The next one will be post-processing, and I actually leave the post-processing at low. I don't see much difference in terms of post-processing quality because honestly, motion blur, I don't use motion blur. I find motion blur something a little bit jarring, so I leave motion blur out. And if you don't use it and you actually leave the post-processing to low, I haven't found much difference in terms of quality, and honestly I haven't found much difference in terms of performance. The big changes will start going now. If you lower the foliage to mid, it will have some uplifting in your FPS, or even to low, but when you go to low, the quality starts to deteriorate a little bit. Now, for something that really eats FPS, we need to start looking at the mirror quality. Unfortunately, in Assetto Corsa, you can do it like an iRacing. You can remove the mirror quality, but or you can remove the mirrors. But sadly, I haven't found a way to, to see the rear view camera or the side mirrors that I don't use, to remove them all and just leave the one up top with that mirror only working. So I lower it to low. And then the view distance, I do leave it at 80 meters because you really need some distance. You need to understand what the hell is going on. Some people just go for dive bombs from middle and nowhere. And 80 meters seems to be more than enough. And now, one that is incredibly useful, or these two that are incredibly useful, is to lower your frame rate limit to something like 20 to 30. It will be a little bit strange to see your mirror going at 20 FPS, but you still get the most of the perception, and this does help a little bit on your FPS, and so does the mirror resolution. It means if the mirror resolution is low enough, it's less stress on your CPU and GPU to do all these computations and getting an extra image looking at the back. And that back image isn't really that important besides seeing where they are moving left or right. And, that does help a lot, as does the opponent's visibility. It's something really strange in Assetto Corsa Competizione, because at Nordschleife, you really are not seeing more than a few cars at a certain level. When you go past, 2-3 laps, you may see 4 or 5. Unfortunately, the opponent's visibility render all the cars up to this number, and you can render them all. And even if they are on the other side of the planet, Assetto Corsa Competizione speaking, they will be rendered even if they are behind trees, if they're behind a few corners, and it's really not optimized to something that is manageable. It can go, 20 or something like that. It might be a little bit strange at the start when you have all the cars, but as the time progresses, you won't be seeing all of these cars anyway, so you can lower them a lot, and this will have a huge impact. The last one that I would recommend is to lower your foliage LOD quality, as there's lots of foliage around, and foliage will be one of the driving factors of performance. If you lower this to, say, low or mid, it will help you a lot, but I'm keeping it at mid because you can still see some in front, some of the foliage in front, and it will still have some quality. The last point that I'm going to talk about, it's something that a lot of people swear by. They claim they see a lot of performance uplifts. I haven't found it much. I found it more in terms of keeping the visual quality while lowering the quality on DLSS. And it is to change the DLSS DLL, download this DLSS, and posting it to your Assetto Corsa Competizione folder. There are a few videos out there that will compare the versions of the DLSS between 3.5, 3.6, and 3.7. As far as I know, I believe that the version that is available on Assetto Corsa Competizione, it's much, much older than this. And from that point onwards, even if you keep the old version, in terms of performance, side to side, they'll be more or less the same, I found, in terms of performance. But when you lower the quality on the DLSS quality bar, it will keep more of the visual quality on this new DLSS DLL. So I would recommend that you would download this, and of course keep the old one stored somewhere. So you would download this, on the link will be on the description. It will be Tech Power Up. Nothing will happen to your Steam account. This is a verified DLSS from NVIDIA. You go directly to your Steam apps, Common, Assetto Corsa Competizione, then AC2, plugins, DLSS, binaries, third-party Win64, and then you would copy this. Of course, before copying it, I would recommend you that you change the name of this one or do a backup or something like that, because if something goes wrong, you won't need to do a verifying install or anything like that. This is essentially plug and play, and it will work. And in my opinion, more than doing the performance, it does keep a better quality of image. And these are my options for Nordschleife. It was a way to keep the performance very close, or if not 120 FPS all the time, because I'm using it on the TV. If I had an 144 monitor like I had before, I would try to figure out something else to, raise the performance somewhat. I think 120 FPS or 144 FPS should be good enough with these settings. Of course, if you have a better graphics card, you will have better performance. And of course, if you have a worse graphics card than I have, it's likely you'll have to figure out what you need to do on a DLSS and probably change some other settings to have less quality and then uplifting a little more of FPS. You can even drop the number of cars seen, and that will help a lot as well. Therefore, these are my options. If you have more options, if you have more things to say about how to improve the performance of Nordschleife in Assetto Corsa Competizione, leave it below, because this way we can do like a community effort to find something that is optimal. Probably not for everyone, but mixing and matching between what everybody is saying and doing.